Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1047th New Social Environment. I'm Chloe Stagaman, Director of Programs here at the Rail, and I have the extreme pleasure to be your MC today for a conversation featuring Fabian Treiber and Andrew Woolbright. And now I'll introduce Fabian and Andrew. Fabian Treiber layers up and applies fine glazes using highly pigmented acrylic inks and paste-like masses of paint. The works seem like representations of objects, landscapes, or interiors, but the artist's focus is less on the pure reproduction of reality and rather on recreating his memory thereof and the feeling thus induced. In other words, the transfer of feeling that lies beneath the surface. Treiber's painting is concerned with the balancing and shifting of the demarcation line that seems to determine our perception and feeling, while at the same time always showing us we are dealing with a painted and thus distinct reality. And our host today, artist, curator, and critic Andrew Woolbright, is based in Brooklyn and is an MFA graduate from RISD in painting. Woolbright is the founder and director of the gallery Below Grand, located on the Lower East Side in New York. In addition to curating, we're very lucky to have Andrew as an editor-at-large at the Brooklyn Rail. In 2021, Woolbright curated the show Density Betrays Us with Angela Dufresne and Cash Ragona at The Hole, and curated shows at Provincetown Fine Arts Work Center and Hess Flato in the summer of 2022. He currently teaches at the School of Visual Arts and Pratt Institute and was a resident of the Sharp Polenta Studio program in Dembo from 2021 to 2022. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Andrew to get us started, with gratitude to you all to be in this space with us today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon to talk about this incredible show of Fabian's up at Rutkowski. I really hope you all get a chance to go see it if you haven't. I got to go see it yesterday, and it was a phenomenal show. And I think also something like really necessary and needed right now for, where the state of things in painting here in New York. I was really impressed by all the nuance and everything. So Fabian, hi, and how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And where are you joining us from right now?
Well, I'm joining you from my hometown or my place. It's Stuttgart in Germany, southwest Germany. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
I don't know.
On that note, why don't we jump straight into the slides if we can? Because I'd love to ask you more about that. What was your education like, Fabian, before we get into this lovely show?
Well, sorry.
I think there's a little bit of a delay, so I'm sorry, but I included a work of an old professor of yours, and I'm interested in like what getting into painting as a young artist was like.
Yeah, well, it was interesting to get into painting with Rito's work because, I mean, I have to admit, when I started studying, before that I did a job training, so I wasn't that young anymore. So, but at the same time, I had, of course, a certain vision of painting, like most people have. But when I first encountered Rito's work, which was more like I don't know how to describe it. It was like the painted assertions in a way, you know. It's so he just claimed that, for instance, this one which we can see here, that this is painting. So, and this was very interesting to me, I have to say. Yeah. So checking out the borders of what actually painting can be.
Yeah.
Nowadays. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, sorry to put you on the spot and make you, and I don't want you to speak for everything, but what's the scene like in Stuttgart now? And is painting something that a lot of people are doing, or is it something that kind of comes maybe from a more conceptual space like this?
Well, the tradition in Stuttgart is super conceptual. Yeah, we have a lot of, I mean, like Reto is a Swiss professor, and we have a close connection to Switzerland. I mean, it's just 2.5 hours to Zurich. Also, I mean, just for instance, Paris is closer to me than Berlin is. So this is pretty much the scene here is, and I mean, yeah. So it's a pretty conceptual school. At the same time, with a long tradition, it's about 250 years or so. But the scene at the moment, I mean, it's a small scene. It's still, I mean, Stuttgart is not, I mean, it was famous for the arts, and it still is probably, but it's in the world, it's probably more famous for companies, like it's an engineer city. It's the German motor city for Mercedes-Benz, Porsche, Bosch, and all these engineers. And yeah. But I like it. I mean, it's as a painter here, you can be kind of focused. There's not so much distraction. I mean, in both ways, positive or negative. So yeah. And after my studies, I just stayed here.
Yeah. When you first started off painting, were you looking at a lot of historical painters, or were you coming at it fresh? And did some of these kind of more conceptual ideas of painting, do you still feel influenced by that in your work now?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, of course, I had this certain idea of painting, which was more historically, but within my studies, maybe, like I mentioned, so there were more ideas of, let's say it like that, painting came up. So, and I feel a strong influence from formalistic painting. It was also, I mean, when I studied, I mean, it's this class system here. So you have one professor and just stay with him or her over your studies. It can become a very close relationship, and also a huge influence, of course. So it was interesting because Rito's class was very, I would say, and hopefully this word is existing in English. It's kind of a heterogenic class. So we had photographers, sculptors. So there was always this formalistic language was the way we could talk to each other. So so this had a deep influence on me, so that I could talk to a photographer on this formalistic level always, before narrative levels or anecdotic levels or whatsoever. Yeah.
Very interesting. Can we move to the next slide? I wanted to include one because talk a lot about formalism, but I know this altarpiece is in and there's something before we get into your work that struck me as there's and I'm still finding the language for it, but there's something maybe like a shared common thing. There's like, these are about very serious subject matter, or like they propose to be about one thing, but then the artist is really kind of, making things that become almost pathetic or humorous, or it really becomes about like, the flagellation of Christ. Christ is not being flagellated. For me, it's about that kind of yellow-orange figure. It's about just like keeping bodies of different color and space in an interesting way.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, we could talk about this painting maybe for a whole evening. So but I mean, there's one thing you mentioned which is kind of interesting. It was probably the last sentence you dropped, was that there are figures which are completely orange or something like that. I believe, or I have this, I mean, I would love to believe that this was kind of, even if this whole work is based on a canon, that there's this possession of Christ, and you have to do it that way and this way. And on the other hand, maybe the artist didn't know how it looked in Palestine, and so there are some things maybe he could free himself to, on a formalistic level, to say, okay, but this orange here looks great,
Yeah.
So I would love to believe that.
Yeah, I mean, it's similarly, it's like it feels very free and like a type of liberation, but also as we're reading about the series too, and it was saying that the artist was really troubled by the wars that were happening in Germany at the time. And
I mean,
like the idea of, and something I want to talk to and get to in your work is the representation of chaos or the representation of the times. And sometimes painters do that in very formal terms, you know, and I'm interested if you think of yours in that way. But let's move to the next slide, because I'd love to now start looking at your work and get a sense, and we can just kind of click through these as we're talking. But
yeah.
I'm wondering, in past interviews, you've talked about your interest in being a moderator of painting, or like kind of taking work from online culture. Like, can you describe being a moderator?
Well, this is also a thing which came up, or over the years it grew organically, that I found myself in that, or I had this idea that there are so many things when you work on with the canvas, with the painting itself, so that you feel there are so many things, or at least it's a deep belief of mine that there are so many precious and unique things happening. So this is one way to answer the question, is that I believe that there are things which just happen by the first touch of to the fabric or something like that. The material itself does something, and I have to believe that in this way I'm moderating what's happening there. So I try to keep precious things because they're unique, and try to question the painting itself, what could be the next directions, or where's the next change of course, you know what I mean? This is I see myself in that role, in a way. Yeah. It's not that I'm the creator, so it's more moderating. The moderator feels more familiar to me as a role. Yeah.
Within that
I mean, I also mentioned at some point that it's more about finding pictures than creating them. I guess I said that once. Yeah, this is maybe also an idea of being the moderator. Yeah. Being in a dialogue or something like that. Yeah. So yeah.
Very interesting. I mean, because there's a lot going on with this show, so I'm excited about kind of unpacking it with you. But on the surface level, it's like an interior exterior thing, or it's interior scene for the most part. But the subject matter of that seems not secondary or incidental. It seems important, but at the same time, it really does seem about this way of finding the painting. And I'm wondering, just technically, formally, what's your starting point? Is color how you're starting to like think through an image, or is it a type of relationship to texture? Because these things have a really incredible range of like really textural, brittle surfaces versus light area things. Like, what's the entry point finding?
I mean, it's hard to mention one single entry point, but actually you also already mentioned them. I mean, there can be, most of the time I have to admit that it's really, the entry is about color. So because there's this idea of mine that color carries emotions in a way. And I don't want that to sound, trite or something like that, but that's really like, I mean, actually the starting point is that I don't make sketches, I make notations. So I note myself down a certain situation, like, but very open, like for instance, painting night. Yeah. So, but not a particular night or whatsoever, or something which I experienced 5 days before. It's really like the idea of painting night. So intangible things like night. So night starts, for me, color carries night in a way. So a dark blue can carry a night. So, and that's actually often how I start. So, and then I try to, I mean, it's a kind of watercolor technique, I would say, most of the times. So it's wet on wet. So, and there's this, like I mentioned it before, there are these very unique moments on the first layer where you can do something with the color, which you can't do anymore, I don't know, 5 days later. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
And that's how it all starts. I try to force the painting to a unique point a tipping point maybe, well, everything from there it can grow off or something like that. Yeah. So, but it starts with the idea of painting night, a night sky, a stormy sky, the idea of painting wind or waves. Like, I don't know. I'm very much interested in translation, the translation of things, and the translation, a bold translation into painting, maybe. Yeah.
While we're on that topic of color, it's sort of struck with me. It's so specific, but it's not natural. Like that green is like a simulated artificial green, and I love it. But like I really do love this kind of peachiness that you to see picked up in a few of them. And there's a part of me that's like, oh, that's kind of like a body or like skin or like looking through the inside of a can or something and seeing light through it. But then I'm also wondering if you're thinking of it in this type of maybe poetic personified way, or if it is a formal thing that like that peach just kind of, it's hard to know if it's emerging or escaping you.
Oh my God. That's a tough one. Wrong answers only. Well, I would say, yeah, can I put it like that? I mean, it's simultaneously happening both at the same time. So yeah, of course, these are formal decisions. That's how I was trained, and I maybe know at a certain point, it's the only anchor I have at a certain point are formalistic decisions, because the way I work is not that I want to enroll a huge story or something like that. It's like I described, I'm in this constructive, or the best way is when it's a constructive dialogue, where you have to be open all the time for a change of course, what the painting demands you in a way. So yeah, on a certain level, of course, it's for formal decisions, but at the same time, there is, I guess, and that's me as the author, is I have a deep belief in this poetic dimension of painting. Like I mentioned, I mean, translating things. So painting is a language for me. So, and there's maybe ways paintings can describe things which words can't. Yeah. And I have also this belief that I mean, now as we can discuss this here I mean, we can discuss this via language, but at the same time, I guess you experience my work on another level than I do it. So you know what I mean? There's there is something in between, which is hard to describe. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I really like what you just said about, because you start with notes or notationally often, then you get into the painting, and the painting is like going off the notes, but then it's like you just said, which I love, painting expresses something that the language can't. How actively are you thinking about that as you're going through a painting? Like you start with the notes, but then you're thinking like, okay, this cannot be achieved by what I just did. I'm trying to do something kind of that only a painting can fill in a blank.
I mean, maybe you saw it, that there are notes on the canvas on the So I do constantly notes while painting. So yeah, this is kind of it describes sometimes the state of the painting, but also it describes maybe the next decision. So it's also part of the process that there are still notations which could probably lead me 2 days after to decisions. Yeah, I mean, often decisions are based on formally, but at the same time, and it would be absurd if I would neglect that at a certain level the paintings start to become a stage for something. Yeah. And I try to again moderate that it stays on a certain level where it maybe is on the way to become something, but at the same time collapse, because I found that super productive. I mean, it's a super interesting thing to me.
Could we Man, there's so much interesting. I really love how you answered that, but I want to pick up on that very last word, collapse, because I also want to talk to you, and going back to that altarpiece painting.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something about your paintings that kind of function as a joke for me. Like, I don't find them funny, but I find them that, like, there's a similar process of setting something up, and then the punchline
Mm-hmm.
is changing the expectation. And I wonder about
Mm-hmm.
that type of collapse, and how much of the painting is about kind of building up the illusion and then saying, remember,
Mm-hmm.
it's a flat thing, it's an object.
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is a kind of a compass to me. I mean, like I just tried to describe it, that there is this, that I have this belief that this is at this point where maybe things collapse, or your expectations, I disrupt your expectations of things being like this or that. So that's maybe a point where a painting can become autonomous. You know what I mean? So it's where it really begins to start assertions from within itself. So it's
Mhm.
I'm not a carpet. I'm a painted carpet. So treat me
Yeah,
like that. So you know what I mean? So
yeah.
and I like that when it flips in a way that it's not, I'm not here to fulfill your expectations,
Hmm.
ideas of right or wrong or whatsoever. I mean, we could talk about perspective or something like that for the whole evening, but it's really like, I like that idea that this kind of productive misunderstanding happens.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
I mean, it
it's like,
sounds weird, but yeah.
no, I think that makes total sense. Like, I was thinking just about, like, you use the word collapse, but I just think of like productive failure. That, like you said, when the
Hmm.
rug doesn't look like a rug, it makes you imagine what a rug looks like. It, like, kind of mirrors
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
that reality. The other thing going
And I
along.
mean, there are so many things which I call. I mean, I have also a series. I didn't show it in New York now, but there's, for many years I did a series which is called Common Things, where I just did try to translate very direct, common things in a way. But and then something came up to me, and just to mention that, it's like there's so much common sense. You know, we both agreed when I talk about a tree, not a specific one. So we have an idea in our mind of a tree.
Yeah,
So and that's this carpet thing. I like that a lot. The idea
yeah,
that we just agreed in so many things, and we could probably sit on a bench in Central Park and look at the lake, but I doubt that we would see the same things. You know what I mean?
yeah. Well, I love that. I really like that thinking about kind of dealing with subjects that start from a place of agreement, and going back to the way you talked about it, of this almost like type of watercolor process where it makes these paintings very immediate. Like, they kind of form as an image very quickly when you look at them, because it is,
Mm-hmm.
it does for the most part have like a one touch, right touch type of language. So then when something is off, just a little bit off, it really makes you do the second look, and really, disturbs the whole thing. I think that's a really dramatic spectrum you set up through the the agreement versus the
Mm-hmm.
kind of static in the agreement.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. Ah, that's interesting. Yeah, that sounds great to me. Yeah.
I also wanted to
I
ask you
mean,
about mimicry too, because that, like, the carpet not being a carpet, is one language, but also, like, there are moments where the carpet is painted the same way you would paint like a bone, which is painted the same way as you'd paint a cigarette, or it's like you're kind of throwing skins around in a way that feels like there's like a sympathy of things, or reminding you that you can paint things to look like the wrong things in this interesting way. Can you talk about mimicry, or is that something that you're thinking about?
well, yeah, mimicry is a big thing. But maybe I can hook on at a certain point. I mean, there was this. I have this. I mean, yeah, it's a belief, but I like it when things can become very direct because they kind of immersive in a way, because this can also be by the size of things that you could almost grab them and the surface looks very tempting to you. But then again, I also like to disrupt this expectations again. So yeah. I mean,
I was thinking about it maybe as like as mimicry, but also maybe like exchange, or like it's like kind of it did remind me in some ways of like some of the surrealist paintings, which I want to get to, but like where an object is next to another object and it kind of informs each other, or it's like just proximity can kind of create semblance or something, you know? And for you, it feels maybe like more of a kind of a trickster, or like it's saying like, I want to deny you that so I can remind you that this is about formalism.
Yes. On a certain level, you're absolutely right. But I like what you mentioned. I mean, I also like it when the material itself can inform on a if it's good on a very nice level. So it forms about itself. So it reminds you again, I'm a painted cigarette. So, but at the same time, there's this idea of, okay, the surface looks almost like no. Yeah, you know. Yeah. And it's this, I mean, when I paint a tree, it's not that I want to paint a specific tree. I maybe the approach is that I think, okay, what surface could this tree have, or you know, so and then I try to really build it up that it's again kind of immersive, but it hasn't to fulfill the idea of the perfect tree. So it's more like it has to fulfill the idea that I'm the right perfect tree within this painting. So it's it's yeah.
I like that a lot. I mean, well, like at what point do you, or do you ever, what point do you close the world off? Because I really like the way you talk about your paintings, is like you start a painting and then the next painting is kind of a response to that first one, and the next one they kind of become palimpsests, or like sets, you know, of reference within reference. I'm wondering if you're still kind of thinking about the world at large, or if it really does kind of become this like world building project at some point that you're starting with one and seeing through.
I have to ask you, I mean, the world at large means
I mean, like at some point, you know, are you still looking for kind of exterior information for these, or is it really like you're closing off the room in your studio after you've made a few of them, and it is like they're responding, like the tree makes sense within the tree world that you made in the first painting, and then you're responding to that in the second one.
Yeah, got you. So, well, it's no, it's really like I just the paintings kind of infect themselves and influence themselves. It's not that I have to. I mean, there are certain times throughout the year where I have the feeling that I have to open up the studio in a, if you would say it like that, just to get some new influences. But it's not like that I don't have to take walks, for example, or something like that.
Yeah.
Just it's like, I don't know, the last year I guess I was working on, I had a close look on Eastern Asian paintings because for example, so this was I opened my doors to that because I was interested in the idea of how they did translate things in painting history, for instance, which and they weren't aware of, I don't know, Renaissance painting, for example, or Middle Age painting, but they found the same solutions maybe on one hand to describe water you find some vocabulary to describe water, for example, but at the same time neglected the idea of a correct perspective because it didn't fulfill their idea of painting. You know what I mean? And this is something what was super interesting to me, and yeah, this was my opener. So I got myself books with Chinese painting, for example, and stuff. Yeah, so that's the open doors.
I like that too. If we could go to one of the maybe the larger paintings, or if we could kind of keep clicking through. Yeah, like 32 or 33. The other thing now that you bring up like Chinese paintings is it's oftentimes a world without shadow or very faint shadow. And I think that it allows like that flower in the foreground is like hyper real, you know, it has such presence because it has such, you know, the shadowed edge or the contour is so strong versus the landscape behind it. It really, it's like a stage, you know, or it feels like to that language you've used before is like a stage of something.
I mean, yeah, this is fulfills also the idea that this is a nice. I mean, nice is a stupid word, but it's a formal decision that besides of this blurry shapes, this hard edge shape can create some formal tension, of course. And on the other hand, I also like that you put it that way, that it's a hyper realistic flower, because it's just maybe it's just a hyper realistic idea of a flower. It's I don't know that kind of flower. I mean, and so or the branch or something like that. So it creates I mean, I like the idea that paintings can create some resonance to you on the one hand, but at the same time can really assert something artificial by not narratively telling you I'm artificial. They're just by nature they are artificial in a way.
Well,
I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. Hopefully,
no, it makes a lot of sense. I also think that this like I wonder, because we talked about that at the opening, a lot of people looked at your work and saw narrative and even saw surrealism or wanted to ask you about it. I'm wondering how you feel about those, you know, which I feel like are very American assumptions, especially like right now of how painting is constructed, but also like I mean, there's another part of me that thinks that that's another level of trickery, which you're setting these things up and then you're like, I don't want to talk about narrative at all. It's about color relationships and textures and haptic responses. But how's it? I mean, why do you think that is, that people are asking if these are surrealist, and what's your response?
I mean, how did you see surrealism in the works when you saw the exhibition?
No, I didn't. I mean, like in a very distant way, and this is like trying very hard, because I thought of that after our conversation. I thought of it maybe in a type of Bataille surrealism, this like base materialism of like high and low mixed and conflicted, or like, you know, you're really upsetting something through these images. But like, I think a lot of people use that language now to just mean this is not natural, or it's depicting a world that isn't real, so it must be surreal. I didn't personally get that language myself.
Yeah. So that's why I asked you. I mean, and it's for me, it's the role is it's really hard to fulfill. I mean, I don't want to neglect all the time things like if people come up with surrealism, but I guess, I mean, again, we could talk a whole evening about surrealism. So this is just a like labeling thing. So I mean, surrealism to me is, I mean, first of all, it was a movement and it was also psychological ideas to understand maybe a certain human standpoint in a way.
Yeah.
But in our days, I really have the feeling, and maybe that's also the big misunderstanding, that surrealism is often put just because of a motive-based idea. Just if, I mean, isn't it funny that, I mean, just because things are unreal doesn't mean that they are not real. You
Yeah.
know, and surrealism, it's just an easy way to just put weird things together and just
Yeah.
and for me I guess it begins with the approach. So I don't want to do surrealistic painting, and so I guess also it definitely it has an effect on my decisions I do while painting. So I don't see myself as a surrealistic painter. Yeah.
I find myself talking about surrealism a lot, teaching, just because I really do think it's terrible about how little understood surrealism is. And in terms of the word has become so big that it's broken, that it doesn't encapsulate all the ideas that it started with. And now it has become this catch-all of, if this is not a world I could actually live in, then it must be this other thing. And like the other thing that and tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think your paintings are really about psychology at all. Like, I don't think I really think it's operating in the eye and in the body, and it's like a physical or like perceptual response, but it's not about, psychological states as structures or anything. I mean, how do you feel about that?
I would 100% agree.
Yeah, all right.
I mean, of course, there can be psychological levels on. I mean, it also depends on who's encountering the works in a way, but again, I would take it from the approach itself, and so my approach is not I don't know, trying to paint some psychological Arcadia. It's really like questioning dimensions of painting itself, dimensions of translating things into another language. So in my case, in a painterly language, it's this immersive thing which I'm super interested in, that you really find yourself I would say, I mean, it's probably super weird, but people mention to me that my paintings are quite lyrical, sometimes very poetic, and I like that a lot more. Talking about, I mean, if you're talking about language and translating language and certain common sense, like we agreed on things and then translating them in something. So I like the idea that they are probably function more on a poetic level than on a psychological or surrealistic level. So and therefore they are real. So I mean, poetry word by word is a real thing, and I mean, just if a sentence doesn't make sense, that doesn't mean that it's directly a surrealistic sentence. You know what I mean?
Right. Completely. Could you talk about, because I think this has a relationship to that too, of another reason is like, not to think of this through, I hope there's a productive binary, I don't believe that this painting can be a binary, but I feel like within your work, there's a type of casualness on one end, like like a type of, the airbrush mark does it once and it really affects it, versus this liveness of like the way this ponytail or the way this hair, becomes like so vivid in contrast to the background. Like, how are you thinking? Are those helpful terms, or how are you thinking of like approaching a quick, effective, efficient touch versus a really formed thing? How are you selecting that in like a painting like this?
Oh
Awesome.
my God.
Answer. Yeah.
Again, wrong answers only.
Yeah.
Well, there's, I mean, specifically in this painting, I mean, I guess it was also, I mean, like I have this certain frameworks like interior, maybe still life on a certain level, and landscape. I like that a lot to play with that frameworks, also to question painting itself, but at the same time, these are so many expectations are connected to these classical sujets, so to say.
Yeah.
And I guess there were at a certain point when I also started to create this very large panels and like works. So I began to thought about. I mean, I always was thinking about. Guess it's I mentioned it before. So like this intangible things, how to find translations, painterly vocabulary for intangible things. Like yeah, I started with painting a night. This can be a start for painting, but also within a painting, trying to paint something like wind, daytime, nighttime. So you have to find yeah a vocabulary which can and these paintings came up when I thought about time itself, the most intangible things, maybe on a very static medium like painting is. So painting is maybe distilled time or compressed time, but at the same time, it's hard to paint time itself. So, and I came up with the idea just to create several rooms where things happen simultaneously in a way. Yeah. But I don't know if that answered your question, actually.
Well, but that's really interesting. Like when you say it's about time, so you mean like trying to depict multiple experiences at once. But the other thing too is like for me, this painting really feels like the aboutness of it is this way that the hardwood floor kind of creates an awning at the top of this painting that reminds me of like Fra Angelico or Della Francesca, this type of Byzantine space, or even like a Persian miniature. Like it's like inside out. It feels like if this painting has an aboutness, it feels like that, like a structure that you really felt like was an entry point, and specifically a structure that has a painterly language of inside outside, metaphysical real, like the way Persian miniature paintings are like people are out in the garden drinking, but then the gods are drinking inside and you can see inside the building too.
Yeah. I mean, I like that you mentioned metaphysical levels. So yeah, this is a framework I used or I came up to. I mean, I like this idea that, again, maybe we could also talk about this altarpiece again. So I like this idea that if you're, I mean, also in a sense of talking about time. So trying to paint things which happen simultaneously. So you have to create windows maybe or things like that. So where things can happen really simultaneously, but at the same time you experience them compressed. So that was an idea. So I found myself that this was very stimulating to me thinking about that. And also this led me to decisions I would probably never did if I was thinking about time as something continuous. So I thought I started to think about time of things within painting more like a circle, Yeah. But the references, I mean, I was looking at Giotto paintings a lot and things like that, because there's also, on a certain level, this was also formally stimulating to me, but I like the idea that this is, that there was this urge to translate something into painting and decisions were made, and it came out that, like we all know, these paintings where so many things are happening simultaneously,
Yeah.
and it just felt right to do it that way. So, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I share an interest in those paintings because it feels, you know, like a parallel history, you know, that so much of painting arrived at like a singular subject or a viewpoint or a focal point.
Mhm.
And those paintings
Mhm.
trying to, you know, like who, you know, Giotto at times is almost like, who am I even to say who I am, let alone what the subject of this painting is. Like I have to get all these different scenes in one thing. And it,
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm wondering, because I mean, like I'm wondering, your painting to me impresses itself as a type of it, you really understand it as a genre, and then it seems like you're having a lot of fun and like again kind of setting up jokes within it and casualness within it, but the structure of it feels really interrogating. And I'm just wondering, like for you, if there are rules in your mind that a painting follows, like for your painting, but also like if you think of like painting as a genre that you're like, painting does this really well and it doesn't do this well, and if you start doing this it breaks into a
Mhm.
drawing maybe, you know, are there rules that you think about while you're painting?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, I mean, there are rules, definitely. Yeah. But I guess every single work creates rules. I mean, and so maybe if we hop to the beginning of our conversation where I mentioned that, so I try to be as open and as I can, and also have a close look on what's really happening on the painting. So, and there are rules or categories, or like if painting has kind of in general, painting has a kind of grammar, so to say, and we all use vocabulary. So, and there's a right or wrong, but I believe there's a grammar in each painting which you have to understand while doing it. So, and then you can decide what's right or wrong for this single work.
Yeah.
Um, but of course, there are things. I don't know. Are there rules? Are there rules which you can't do? No, hopefully not. I mean, but at
Yeah.
the same time, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
there,
Well,
there are
maybe another
do's
way
and
to,
don'ts. Yeah.
yeah, maybe another way to put it, you know,
Yeah.
because you do come from a background that is really conceptual, or you were taught by conceptual
Hmm.
artists, you know, Rito's work to me really feels like a type of painting that happens when painting gets really exhausted. It's like people that stick
Hmm.
with it when you're not supposed to be a painter at all. So it becomes a prop, or it becomes a set piece, or it becomes performative. You come from
Hmm.
a background, and I'm wondering, uh, is there something that you think painting still makes painting urgent, or is there something you think painting can still do and needs to do or should do versus maybe, you know, a type of casual painting we see a lot of? Like, is there something that you think painting specifically is good at addressing at this moment?
Oh yes, yes. I mean, this is a tough one, definitely. I mean, yes, of course. I mean, I wouldn't do that if I
Right.
wouldn't believe that there's an urge for painting. So, and painting as the deep understanding, the deep belief that painting is really a unique language which can describe things other medias can't. So that's the thing. So maybe, but so yeah, of course. And I guess you can. The thing is, if a good work, piece of art, but let's stay with painting. If it touches you, if it concerns you. I mean, I have this deep belief that also painting is not about motive. So it can be the most simple thing in the world. You can paint, I don't know, a cardboard or something like that, but this can haunt you nights. Yeah, this painted cardboard, and I mean that's just a deep belief of mine. That it's not about a motive. It's like the way materials come into play, like they are describing something I wouldn't say otherworldly, but you know what I mean? It's really like on a metaphysical level, things which you can't describe by words. And maybe you can try to get as close as you can with words. And that's maybe why we are talking here. That's a wonderful thing. Isn't that great?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I love that answer.
It's very romantic, maybe. It sounds pretty much romantic, I believe, maybe.
Yeah, and I think it is. I mean, I think that you know, like it feels like sometimes I find myself talking about a lot when I'm like teaching painting is, you know, like make a joke, but it's like back in my day, you would pick a subject that you didn't think anything about. Like you'd pick a subject that you were ambivalent about. You never pick something you liked. We were told you shouldn't pick something you like because you already knew how you felt about it. So painting something that you were really kind of cagey about or uncertain about was a good starting point. Like you said, the cardboard box is like the painting trick is to make the cardboard box interesting to you and capture something. That painting without motive does seem to me specific to painting, or like making without motive. The more motive you try to put into it, it maybe functions more as an illustration or an archive or something.
Yeah. And I mean, if you went through that, I mean, I wasn't teaching that a lot, but I guess if you understand this, so then you're in a good way that you can almost, I mean, then you're in a good way to find a shape for your idea. So this can be in painting, but this can also be in other medias, but you have to understand why are you using the media and how to use it. And I would also say you have to love your media. So you have to love painting if you want to make good paintings. Yeah.
Totally.
Again, super romantic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think for you, it's like it ends in such a constructive place where it's a familiarity. It's romantic, but you love it so much that you can then kind of play around with it. You know, it's like you're over at your friend's house so often that you don't have to ask permission to grab something out of the fridge. You can just, you know, kind of tell a joke, or you can kind of work with it.
I like that image.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, so I mean, you're looking at Chinese painting, definitely Giotto, some Byzantine perspective or reverse perspective. Are there any more recent painters that are on your radar, or people that you feel like maybe you're extending or reacting to or relating your work to?
Well, I mean, there are always a lot. I mean, recently I was looking a lot at John Davola. You know him?
No.
And I like this. I mean, I like this the Suma series. I like a lot. And I guess at some point he mentioned, and this was, I mean, this can be the start of a 1 year work from my perspective, is when he mentioned that he treats time as a verb. I found that, I mean, that's like my brain explodes thinking about that, time as a verb. So yeah. So yeah, that for instance, but I mean, there's painterly. I mean, I saw an exhibition last year. It was also in New York. I mean, I saw the Alex Katz retrospective, and I was also blown away by the way he can simply put some color on the canvas, and it's just, you know, like it can't be something else. It's like it's super rare and put, and I like that a lot. I mean, this impresses me. Yeah.
Really
Mary Heilman is super interesting as well.
Yeah.
I like her work a lot. Yeah.
I was just reading an interview she did this morning. It's really funny you bring her up, but I love it. She talks about her work too. Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting that you bring up Alex Katz. Do you feel like there's a strong relationship in some ways between? I mean, like they look alike, but I do think there's a type of primacy or a quick look that your work shifts. And I think that you're then building out a poetry, maybe. But
Well, I'm afraid that I guess I'm unsure if he would probably dislike my work. I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean, I'm impressed by his way that how he yeah puts things painterly, very direct, just at the right place. So this is something which impresses me a lot. Which I try. I mean, maybe there's a relationship to that I, like I mentioned it before, that I love the idea that the material can inform itself. So like painting, for example, a gust of wind can mean, okay, I have this, for example, I have my airbrush, and the most direct way to directly translate wind or a gust of smoke is just using the airbrush, because it's not the mimicry of smoke. It is actually smoke which just hits the canvas. So that idea, I mean, that is something which impresses me a lot within Alex Katz's paintings. Also on a poetic level, that these sceneries are often very simple, but painterly so attractive. Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah.
it's fun, as little to do with your work, maybe nothing to do with your work. But I was also reading an interview with Jacqueline Humphreys, and she said that every painting you could say is about air in some way. Like, but I do think back to your idea of the airbrush, it's like a literal form of, you know, air, and like the feeling of your lungs filling up, or, you know, it is about not just space, but the air in that space that you're depicting in different ways. Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I think Alex Katz would, well, I don't know, he's not here, but I would imagine he would like this work. Also, I think that's like a really romantic part of painting, as you know, which is that like the people you love the most within painting, you really have to take a step away from, and you have to, I always find myself in a position where I feel like I'm unconsciously negating so much of the things I really enjoy from people before me. And then I'm like, oh yeah, then they don't like my work. You know, it's like, well, you know, it's like I'm actively trying to resist or respond.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. I would 100% agree. Yeah. Of course. I mean, I'm just, like I mentioned, I'm super impressed, and I guess it's also interesting to maybe have a close look on your, for my example, Alex Katz's paintings, and understand where's this magic coming from. Maybe not 100% understand, but, you know, to get a glimpse where this magic is coming from. And then, of course, you have to find your own solution. So you take that as something you learned or whatsoever, and then find your own solutions within your pictorial world or your idea of painting. I guess my idea of painting is it's definitely not the same that Alex Katz's idea of painting is. Yeah.
I've got one more question. I want to open it up because I know we have a few questions from the chat, but that last one, that painting that's still up, I was trying my best to avoid talking about the images of these things as much as possible, because I was really excited just to talk to you about the formal qualities. But how long have you been working with hands, or this motif of hands being in the painting? Because I know previous times there have been no figures at all. And in this show, there are some pointing hands, grasping hands, hands that are doing a thing. And I wonder how that inclusion feels for you. And I'd imagine it's poetic, but what was it like introducing this into your environments?
Well, it was tough because I see myself claiming that, I mean, I'm not interested in humans in my paintings, so not figurative or figures. So, and then there was this certain urge where I felt, okay, yeah, maybe there was a need for this human fragments, because they brought up a new metaphysical level in the paintings. And
Yeah.
and I felt I had to be, I mean, I mentioned that I was dealing with time, and I thought, okay, hands, you know, pointing, doing something like this micro narratives which happen when gestures happen. This is a good way to describe time also on a certain level. So it's really like describing a momentum when someone is pointing at something, someone is just doing very small things which you almost would probably not realize that they are really happening because they're happening so fast, and then freeze them within painting is very creating a certain momentum, also scenic momentum, maybe dramatic momentum, maybe. I was at a certain point I felt the need that this could be the solution, one solution. Maybe I find new solutions within the next years, but yeah.
I love that.
And I like the idea to come up in New York with them, because I mean, yeah, like I mentioned, I didn't paint hands or something like that before. And they are also a little bit kind of quirky, like I guess you mentioned it a couple of minutes before. And that's a nice thing, that these hands are really artificial or not really working, but painterly they do work as well. So I like it. Yeah.
I love that, because I mean, like it you know, they totally work within the painting. Like I accepted them, but it did feel like the maybe the risk you took in the work, or it felt like the new accommodation. And I love hearing the way you talk about it as time. It's like then the hand at the bottom is like a semiotic of now. There's things happening right, and the grasping is like a semiotic of this is almost, you know, like you are things like poetic languages, which was how what I was thinking, but it's I love how you think about them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you put it right. I mean, it's that, I mean, now we are talking about the hands, but really by talking about the hands, we're trying to describe something which we actually cannot see. There's this certain level or certain thing within the paintings which these hands are just a shape for, or like a representative for. But actually, I'm trying to describe why are these hands something which we cannot see in the paintings, but which we maybe can experience in the paintings. So, but this isn't that. I mean, isn't that funny? It's just
I love that.
Finding solutions for things which we actually cannot see. I mean,
a hand for this just happened, this almost happened right now, like experiences and expenses of time through figuration. I think it's really cool.
I mean, a couple of years ago, I read something super nice, also very poetic, about hopper paintings. So that the most interesting things in hopper paintings are actually they're beside the painting. So the white wall beside the hopper painting is the most interesting thing about a hopper painting, because it's the space you literally can't experience, but the whole painting wants to expand to that space.
Yeah.
And that's so beautiful. I mean,
I love that too. Well, I can't think of anything better to end on than that. That's perfect for your show. And I want to give everyone else
thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Fabian.
Wow. Andrew and Fabian, that was incredible. Thank you both so much. That was such a generous and really luminous conversation, and such a pleasure to listen to. So I just want to thank you so much for generosity. We have,
and apologies for weird wording from my side, maybe.
Not at all. It's wonderful. I'm going to ask the first question on behalf of GE and the audience, but I do encourage audience members, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. GE's question, Fabian, is how do you set a mood to enter into your painting? Music, reading, and what are those sources? Thank you.
Well, it's music mostly. Most of the time it's music, even if I ask myself if there's this, if I'm actually, I mean, it's about this music thing is so funny because when you enter the studio, do you play the music which you're actually in that mood, or are you playing the music to become or to get in a certain mood? I can't answer that, but yeah, it's often music. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Can you elucidate a little bit of what kind of music are you listening to? What genre?
Well, at the moment, it's I discovered, and thanks to E.J. Hauser actually, because I saw it in one of her stories. It's NTS Radio, and it's I guess it's a series of Death is Not the End. It's called Death is Not the End. It's super weird things. So today I was listening to psychedelic Greek rock music from the 60s. So.
Love.
For example. Yeah.
Love NTS. NTS is
Yeah.
live right next to their broadcast station. So okay, my next question is going to be from me. I am curious what you would tell your younger artist self that you know now. Like if you could talk to your younger self, what would you say?
Oh my God. Maybe to stay a little bit more calm on some levels. Yeah. But on the other hand, I mean, maybe I'm just here because everything. I mean, it's hard to answer, but yeah. Maybe to reject some exhibitions. I mean, there were some which I just better not agreed on. But
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for that question, GE. If we have no other questions, it is a Rail tradition to conclude these programs with a reading. And Fabian, thank you so much for offering to read a poem today to close us out. So posting the poem in the chat so that those of you who want to read along can do so. I'm going to pass the mic back over to you, Fabian, to close us.
Okay, I have two poems, or at least it's one poem and more one philosophical reflection, maybe, which I came to last year, so and they were really stimulating to me. So there's one from, and yeah, again, excuse my weird German accent, but the one is from Li Bai. It's from the 8th century. It's a Chinese one. So, and it starts now. You ask me why I dwell in these bluish mountains, but I smile without a reply, only an easy mind. The river flows away silently, bearing the fallen peach blossoms. Here's another world, but not the world of man. This was the first one. And the second one is by Su Shi. It's from the 11th century. And this is more or less this philosophical reflection of human being. So it starts now. Do you know about the river and the moon? The former flows on and on, but never departs. The latter waxes and wanes, but never grows or shrinks. If you look at the things from the viewpoint of the changes they undergo, nothing in heaven or earth lasts longer than the blink of an eye. But if you look at them from the viewpoint of their changeless traits, neither the objects of the world nor we ever come to an end. What is there to envy?
Wow.
So that was it.
Those are beautiful. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. That was such a lovely way to conclude today. Thank you, Fabian, for choosing those.
Thank you.
Yeah, and well, and many thanks again to you and to Andrew for this dialogue today, which was such a pleasure to listen to. And thank you to Benno, who was so helpful and organizing this and bringing images together ahead of today. Thank you as well to the Terra Foundation for American Art, who sponsor our NSE program and make daily conversations like this one possible. They also support our archive, where this video will be very soon. The Rail has been free and independent for 23 years, and a donation directly supports our work. So if you'd like to donate to our work, you can do so in the chat. And if you're free tomorrow at 1 p.m., join us for Publishing in Transit, the Rutledge Companion to Eco-Poetics. We'll be talking about eco-poetics with Mary Newell, Charles Pigott, Stephen Collis, and it was created by Cole Swenson. And as is Rail tradition, you all can now turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you so, so much for being here today, and have a good evening in Germany and a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was
I
great.
grabbed myself a beer, I have to say.
Amazing.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
Fabian. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was
Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you for the beautiful readings.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Great
you.
conversation.